you are on the next level. This is The Beautiful Truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And you are very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com with Fintan Dunne reporting. And folks, I'd like you to just take a look at these people. Just look at them. You'll never, well, not those actual people, but people like them from Sweden. While you're there in lockdown, standing over the now dismembered body of someone you used to love just weeks ago, in Sweden, they're doing this.
Life still feels kind of normal in the Stockholm coffee shop, like it was before COVID-19. You can place your order and then chat with a friend, sitting a table or two away.
So I feel like our customers are actually following the guidelines, so they are keeping the distance and they are very not sitting so close to each other.
Sweden has not done what most Canadian provinces have. There are no states of emergency, and businesses have not been ordered to close to enforce social distancing and halt the spread of the infection. Not only are some restaurants still operating, so are schools and daycares.
I follow what the experts says and the people in charge, they take the decisions, and I feel that those measures are good for us here in Sweden.
Yeah, those measures are good for them in Sweden. Let me just show you the graph of Ireland, which has got a lockdown and has had COVID-19 about as long as Sweden. And there you see that Ireland's graph is just trending downwards now. They've got significant lockdown. Let's just take a look at the Swedes. It's probably crazy in Sweden. With 400 in Ireland, we should have double that number. 800 in Sweden, double the population. Let's see. No, they've only peaked at 600 cases per day. And as you see, it's not going crazy at all there. So what's going on, folks? Have the Swedes got it totally wrong? Or have we got it wrong? Let's take a little look at some more here. There's an article in the National Review, and one of the guys who wrote this is a professor. The other guy is a columnist. If the COVID-19 pandemic tails off in a few weeks, months before the alarmists claim it will, they'll probably pivot immediately and pat themselves on the back for the brilliant social distancing controls they imposed on the world. They will claim that their heroic recommendations averted total calamity. Yeah. They will be wrong, unfortunately, and Sweden, which has done so almost no mandated social distancing, will probably prove them wrong. Yeah, good point, because Sweden is not suffering the calamity that everybody thought they would. In fact, hospitals in Stockholm are coping so far with 37 unoccupied intensive care beds 2 days ago when this report was filed. So Sweden has a death toll around about the same as its neighbours. Now, the epidemiologist who's heading up this strategy by the country is optimistic that the measures are working. And here's why, right? This is clever. Because steep falls in cases of winter vomiting bug and seasonal influenza are being taken as signs that people are socially distancing and practicing better hand hygiene. So you see, that's a very clever way of doing it. By looking at the influenza transmission rate and the winter vomiting bug transmission rate, they can tell how effective social distancing is being in Sweden without forcing lockdown on people, which they feel is over the top. But of course, that's not how it's been presented in international media, which are still presenting it like this Sweden's gamble.
Tuesday, though, saw the death toll rise by more than 100, bringing the total to just under 600 people, and raising fears that the outbreak might be spreading. The country's chief epidemiologist says social distancing is working, and more drastic measures will only postpone the problem.
This long-term thing on the low scale that we do in Sweden is much more sustainable and would not cause these enormous differences in the amount of cases getting into healthcare in the same way. So I think both Norway and Denmark are now very concerned about how do you stop these complete lockdowns in a way so you don't cause this wave to come immediately when you start loosening up.
And that's a really good point, because there's a considerable danger that they're playing this entirely wrong. Let me go to that National Review article again, if I can spotlight it again. And it's here, yeah. And just take a look down at some of the concluding points that they make. You know, besides making the point that if social isolation worked, wouldn't things be going crazy in Sweden, which of course they're not, and that their ICU admissions are flat or declining. Yes, all good news. And it ends like this. Nature's got this one, folks. We've been coping with new viruses for untold generations. The best way is to allow the young and healthy, those for whom the virus is rarely fatal, to develop antibodies and herd immunity to protect the frail and sick. As time passes, it will become clearer that social isolation measures like those in Switzerland and Norway accomplish very little, and except increasing misery, pain, death and disease from other causes as people's lives are upended and futures are destroyed. That's not the only people making those points. And Michael Burry, who is famous for being the Big Short, he's a doctor as well as an investor, and that's the guy there, Michael Burry. Michael Burry has been tweeting about this, and he says that the government-directed shutdowns aren't necessary and that they're disproportionately hurting low-income families and minorities. He's argued that over the past couple of weeks, and he's argued it trenchantly, and he's got a lot of good sense there. We're about to, however, get a resolution of all of these questions, because this particular article is going to tell you why now. Because we haven't really, and here's the graphic that will also illustrate, we haven't really ever gotten a handle on this virus in terms of how many people actually contracted it, as opposed to cases, which is, cases we come across, but how many contracted it. So as you see there, that if you look at Germany, which is testing everybody who has any kind of symptoms, then you're testing more of the pyramid, and so your death rate looks relatively high, because the tiny number of deaths at the top of the pyramid there, that little section, is being compared to the rest of the blue section of the pyramid. Whereas in the United Kingdom, where your death rate is being compared to a small number of tests, it looks very severe. So you see, you can't really use these death rates that are being quoted all the time and fatality rates that are being quoted all the time. None of that's going to tell you. What's going to tell you is this: the first ever, and it's researchers from Stanford University, first ever antibody testing being rolled out in California now to see what's going on. And that will tell us how many people have contracted it, because there's a hypothesis going around. Let me just zoom that in a little bit if I can. And the hypothesis is that COVID-19 first started spreading in California in the fall of 2019. That early. And that maybe that explains their lower number of cases. Wow. If it did, that would be just toast for the existing model. Because in fact it would tend to validate the argument that allowing it to propagate in the younger cohort of persons who are at low risk is a smart move. Anyway, I'll just read you some more from the article. Something is going on and we haven't quite found out what it is yet. Just shrink this again. Too big. It says Victor Davis Hansen, a senior fellow with Stanford's Hoover Institute. He thinks it's possible COVID-19 has been spreading among Californians since the fall, when doctors reported an early flu season in the state. Get it? During the same time, California was welcoming as many as 8,000 Chinese nationals daily into our airports. Some of those visitors even arriving on direct flights from Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in China. When you add it all up, it would be naive, he says, to think that California did not have some exposure. He also thinks the Chinese have been very disingenuous, which is a nice word for lying, about the timing of the initial outbreak. They originally said it was early January, then it got backdated to December, and then early December, and now they're saying as early as November 17, said Hansen. If Californians were exposed earlier than the rest of the country to COVID-19, we may have had a chance to build up some herd immunity. He's using that swear word again, herd immunity. Don't say those words. That means you don't have to buy vaccines. Dear, dear, dear. Sorry, I just slipped out there. I didn't realize it was in the article there. You might have a chance to build up some bleep to the disease. We won't know if that's the case until results from the Stanford medical study come back. And the testing could help us start the recovery process, he adds, which is the logical conclusion. It's going to allow us to get back to normal much more quickly because there will be many more people than we think that have antibodies, he said. The results of the study could help us all to feel less scared of COVID-19. Limited testing has resulted in an artificially high death rate. The more people we test who have mild symptoms, who are asymptomatic, or who have recovered, the less lethal COVID-19 will seem. Which is absolutely true, but why would we give a damn about what COVID-19 seems like? The question is, what's the smart science on all this? What is the smart move to make? And the big question all these people are going to have to deal with is, have the folks in Abaland got it right, and have they got it wrong? And guess what? You're going to know before long, because the results of that California test will be out in a week, which is around about the same time that you'd want to be asking your politicians, are you sure that continuing the lockdown is the smart move? Maybe it's possible that you could trust 99% of us, or even 95% of us, to be smart, to be responsible, and do the right thing. Maybe you could trust that if the epidemiology supports it, that, as a collective humanity, we're capable of handling this thing. Maybe you could consider lifting the lockdown. All right. That's it for this edition of The Beautiful Truth. I'll be back with more very soon, and I hope you can join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.